Roll.
Even better slowly. I can move around now.
Oh, we don't
You
even
don't
have
have to,
math.
just half hour to walk.
Oh my gosh. She knows.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Who's coming in by Zoom?
All I told me was.
No, nobody is.
Nobody.
That's how we do it now.
Oh, I get it.
You're all set.
Are we ready?
What is it?
Yep.
Well, we don't know.
I don't have the gavel. My Franklin County and I'll do my whistle. No, I'm just kidding. Call to order the Common Council of City Finance and Community Development meeting for September 9th, 2021. Chairperson Rosenquist is absent, so I am going to run the meeting. We'll take attendance. Ms. Carlin, could you take the roll, please?
Counselor Canales?
Here.
Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
Here.
Counselor Bach?
Here.
Counselor Talon?
Here.
Mayor Rosenquist will be delayed.
Okay, so item number one, approval of the minutes of the August 12th, 2021 Finance Community Development Committee meeting. I will take a motion and a second for approval. Councilor Bott. Second,
Second.
Councilor Canales. Any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move those. Do I need to do a roll call to move those?
No, just all.
Okay, all in favor of moving those to, oh, all in favor of approving, sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay. Number 2 on the agenda, community development and recreation, item 2.1, discussion project updates.
Okay.
Director Miller.
You have to stand next to the chair, Matt. Somebody's still-
I tell you what, why don't I do this?
Speak to the chair.
Hard times for the city of Plattsburgh.
That was-
All right, just going down the list, for the Saranac River Trail, both of the bridges have been installed. Luck Brothers is starting work on the connecting path between the bridges surrounding the MVP site within the next week or two. They're also preparing to pour the concrete decks for both the pedestrian bridges. They are still on schedule to wrap up work by end of September, early October, so the public will have an opportunity to use it before the weather gets too bad this fall. The downtown parking system, the council had a presentation from Mark Burling at IPS earlier this week of the kiosk system that we're proposing for downtown and out at the beach. My office is currently finalizing a sales and service agreement with IPS to present to the council for consideration. And I'll be working with Chamberlain Marks on a funding resolution to allocate the necessary funding to purchase and install everything. For the city beach, we closed for the season on Sunday. As the council was made aware earlier in the summer, revenue figures for this year were far below what they have been in previous years. It was just a little over $10,000 for the entire season, compared to a little less than $90,000 in 2019. The primary reason for that reduction is the lack of Canadian visitors, which constituted the bulk of our revenue in prior years because we don't charge city and town residents for entry. But we are having a meeting with the mayor and several other department heads. I think it's next week to discuss future plans for the city beach in 2020 for marketing and how to incorporate the implementation plan that has been presented to the council and which we're moving forward with as well. For the Great Center City Gym and Marina, the YMCA is a few months into the release of the city gym. I'm awaiting budgetary figures from the YMCA to determine what their expenses versus revenue are for the months of July and August to determine whether the city has any liability to reimburse them as was part of our lease agreement with the YMCA. It was a little slow starting just because you open a gym in the middle of summer, in the middle of a pandemic. It's difficult to attract new customers, but they are slowly building up that customer base, and we do expect an increase in that membership number as we go into the fall and winter, and exercising outdoors becomes less attractive to everyone around. For the DRI, the Streetscape of the Riverfront Access Project, Council, I'm sure most of you have seen the Arts Park, which is 99% complete. There are a few last punch list items that Luck Brothers is working on in advance of the grand opening this Saturday.
What time is that, the grand opening?
I believe the ribbon cutting is at 10, right, Mayor? And there's events before and after that, but that will be the grand opening is at 10 o'clock. The other streetscape and riverfront access projects, the Riverwalk and the Derby Street reconfiguration and improvements are all on hold pending resolution of the prime litigation, because all three of those construction schedules will have to be coordinated. And I'm currently working with the Department of State, requesting an extension of our existing contract, because it does expire in the spring of 2022. And we will need at least an extra year or two, I'm estimating, in order to complete the construction of those projects. For the LRAP finalization, comp plan, and zoning code, the LRAP finalization is working through the prescribed process at the state level for certification. My office has been making revisions to the comp plan in consultation with Saratoga Associates. I'm currently reviewing an updated draft, and I hope to have something for the mayor and the public's review within the next, I would say, week or two. And then we can move on to incorporating the zoning code changes that will kind of dovetail with the comp plan as the foundational documents for planning in the city moving forward. For the revolving loan programs, Ann Holland has been reviewing some of the past procedures that we use for review of loan applications, and is getting into the nuts and bolts of the phase 2 analysis, whereby she'll present the city with a plan forward for both administering and marketing, and putting that roughly $2 million that we have to use going forward for the betterment of the community. The Harborside Master Plan, we have a second project advisory committee meeting scheduled, I believe, for the third week of September, where Barton and Judas will present their initial plans and initial thoughts on what the best way forward for development of the Harborside area and that entire study area. For the City Hall Windows project, we have a signed agreement in place with MQ Windows. Their staff will be on site tomorrow to do a couple of test drillings to certify some of the dimensional constraints and the internal mechanics of the windows. We've made it clear to them that we would like all of the windows replaced no later than April 1st of 2022, in advance of the expiration of the 2 grant funding streams that are attached to the project. So that will require installation of the windows over the winter, which of course is not ideal, but it's the schedule that we have to work with, and we'll certainly make city staff aware well in advance so they can prepare appropriately. Farmers market's done. Yeah, and everything else on the list is either completed or on hold, so.
Mayor, did you want to take over the meeting now that you're back?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd appreciate next time that you don't start the meeting
I told him to
without
start.
the chair. Okay, yeah.
Your master at arms told me.
Did you talk about the, I know last we had a meeting chaired by Councilor Moore here regarding the IPS pay system. Have we talked about that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, the beach implementation.
I gave them the general closing of the season summary.
Yeah, closing the season, and as presented to the council, the last time we were here, Saratoga Associates presented a implementation plan. I am going to look to the council to a spending resolution in about $135,000 to execute the phase 1 environmental and geological exploratory work that we would like to start this year in preparation for next year's rounds of grant funding. It would be ideal to have that information in pocket when we go out for grant awards. Right now, we have about $1 million or so planned for a grant application with Bartlett and Judas in partnership with Saratoga Associates to execute on some of the initial work that's already planned for the beach. That was covered, so we'll look at something later on this month or early next to get that resolution out with hopefully some approval to get that moving forward. But other than that, we are also looking at some maybe capital funding. We're still trying to figure out how to purchase the pay kiosks that were presented to the council on Monday. It seemed that the majority of the members at that committee were positive in the sense of moving in that direction, and that's something that the city's obviously been working on for several years now, which, kind of have to pull the plug or, kind of get that thing started or make some decision, some final decision on how to move forward with that. So anything else in terms of potential spending?
Nothing in the immediate future.
Projects that need funds or?
Nothing that comes to mind right now, just what we discussed today.
Okay.
If you wanted to touch on the progress on the bike infrastructure plans and.
Well, in terms of the community engagement that we went through, or, yeah, I mean, like that's, we did, as most of you all knew and saw and were a participant of, we did go through that bike friendly Plattsburgh plan, and it was very well received in the community. There was a lot of positive feedback. The first engagement had about 70 plus people there. The second one had about, I want to say 20, and then we did an online component that maybe had like 3 or 4 people. I think we exhausted our level of community engagement in that sense, and we tried to provide a number of opportunities to engage with the community. There were some changes that were made to the initial plan. Those changes have been incorporated back into the plan and will be sent out to council. Again, that's the 3-phase project that has about, I think it was $60,000 attached to the first phase.
Of the bike plan,
Yeah, something like that, but a number of the plans also really address Broad Street, for example. That's gonna be, further on down the line, but something that the city of Plattsburgh will want to address eventually in terms of the accessibility, bikeability, walkability of Broad Street, and certainly some traffic calming measures around more highly trafficked and dense areas of our city like Broad Street. The presentations that were given on Monday regarding Margaret, Brinkerhoff, and Court Street, y'all were here, several of y'all were here. They went well. Certainly, we want to start that process this year using some of the funds that we have for that work. There's already funds available. That's not something that the council is going to have to dig into the savings for, dig into our pockets for. That's already monies that are available for that type of work. But we will start to do that planning and design and community engagement work this year to prepare for next year's construction season. But we do want to have some type of price tag associated to that level of work. And that level of work is going to require a significant amount of community engagement, considering we're talking about construction, full depth construction. Think in your mind, Hogan Avenue, full depth construction on Margaret Street. So you can imagine what that's going to create in our community, not only the concerns, but also the end product, which will be a fantastic looking downtown, and something that we want to start to capitalize and build on the Arts Park opening and start to beautify our downtown a little bit. And I don't want to say aggressively, but it is a little progressive in that sense. But those are our 2-3 main roads in downtown. I think that's pretty much covers the
That's it.
majority of it, right, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. One last thing, just looking through my list here, the city had about an $8,000 grant from Clinton County for the fabrication and installation of artistic bike racks throughout downtown, about a dozen of them. You've probably seen several of them. The last two were installed in the Arts Park a few days ago, so aside from one that's remaining to be installed on county property, which they'd like to do themselves, that project is being completed.
And the Arts Park, we're also talking about installing some security cameras. It's one of the nicer places in downtown. We want to keep it that way. We also have some garbage receptacles going in down there. One thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about in infrastructure, but we'll talk about right now is the implementation of a pilot program for a compacting garbage receptacle. You've seen them in bigger cities. They're solar powered. You can fill them up to a significant capacity, and you don't have to empty them every day like we have to do now with the garbage cans downtown. So we're going to pilot a program for downtown compacting garbage receptacle, if you will. Hopefully that takes a little bit of burden off of our downtown staff and helps keep our downtown a little bit cleaner longer. But separate from the work that Matt's doing, just to keep in mind the art park opening, and how we're going to try to keep that area clean with extra trash cans.
So where is that going to take place? Down on the Durkee end or
What's
the
this?
Margaret end? The ribbon cutting? Is that going to be at the lower end of that Arts Park or the upper part of
Well, I
that?
think it's going to be on the upper part where that bigger little area, that seating area is. I think we'll be on top there because I think there's another. Does the Strand have an event happening on Saturday as well?
Harrison Market.
Yeah, right. So the Strand has an event there as well. So we're trying to keep it more centralized. Yeah. Okay. But would love to have, I mean, like, there's gonna be tons of people in town for that, and obviously, you know, Battle of Black for this weekend too, so. Parades and commemoration ceremonies and see all the tents in front of City Hall there, so.
Lots of music.
Lots of music. But please come out if you can for the opening, for the ribbon cutting, and then also for the parade. You know, love to see you all down there.
I think it's going to be good weather too.
I'm hearing so, but I just got rained out. That's why I was late. Want to change after the Riverside dedication.
Any questions from the council?
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
3.1 finance August month end report, and I believe Beth has it to project on the big screen. Matt, can you hit those like? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I get the first page. That's a cash report. That's okay to leave that.
Well, I have to share the screen, so it's,
Okay.
so I need to take this one down.
That looks like a good. No, that's cash report again, so,
It's the,
Month
yeah,
end?
that one there. Yep.
well, that's the cash report as well. That's the month end, August cash report from bank balance.
Those are all of our, yeah, okay.
That's not what you wanted, the cash balance.
That's cash again.
These are the ones you would send us last night, unappropriated.
Yep, that's inappropriate.
Those are the ones you sent us.
I also sent you the year-end financial statements from 2020, and I also sent you the package. Monthly report back.
Did we get those?
I mean, not the August report, because I just finished it last evening. at,
Oh.
Like 4 or 5 or so.
Can those get shared with the council, please?
Yeah, typically we would send those out ahead of time. I will admit that Rich is probably responding to the 50 emails that I sent him
Give it 1 second.
to address some of the budget questions.
Yeah, there's doesn't have budget questions from the mayor. Or Tuesday.
Matt, can we please turn on one light because people can't see the council?
This is September.
That's
Not
2020,
that,
September
yeah.
2020.
Thank you. This is, I thought this is the one you sent last night.
No. Wait, where we sent it?
No, because it's not gonna be on here. One second.
To see if I have it.
This one's on Friday.
Richard.
That's the Friday cash report.
Yeah. Weekly and month end.
Can you show me what it is, and I'll find it on one.
So you look at some of those others first.
What do you
Is
want to
that
start with? When I'm
2021
supposed to
year-to-date?
resend it? Which one do you want to start with, and then I'll go with this one?
It's up to you. Pick one. All right, weekly cash report.
Is that the one you want to start
Sure.
with?
That's for 9-3, right?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. So you're seeing at the top of this report, top left is last week's cash. We're gonna report this week on 9/10, same difference. And if you go all the way to the right on this, you go back years.
Mhm.
You know, you said you wanted to see week to week. This goes back week to week for 10 years.
Through 2016, and then there's another tab on here that goes from 2015 to whenever.
Back to like 2010. So anyway, the top section of it is all the different cash accounts, the general fund, the rec complex fund, which you see is a negative. It's been a negative for quite some time. And that we'll have to deal with at the end of the year. We should put enough funding over there to balance that to zero at least,
Mhm.
because they're running a deficit. The revenue's been cut to nothing, and even though the costs have been cut to nothing for personnel, you still have the fixed costs and debt service for the marina, which, you know, the project was scrapped, so it's not generating any revenue. And you also have, you know, losses on the facility costs for the Crate Center and for the gym, because we're not making a lot of money out of those things being leased out. They're not covering their own costs. Parking lot is the next one down, 140,000. That'll be wiped out at the end of this year when we pay the debt service for it. So that's gonna have a deficit, and projected next year to be $91,000 contribution from the general fund in order to keep that fund solid. We budgeted this year to have a $225,000 loss in that fund.
In water,
Parking.
in parking, sorry, because you said 220. That's right.
Third one down. Yeah,
Yep,
it's up to
okay.
see.
Well, the other thing, sorry, Richard, the other thing is specifically about the parking fund is one of the reasons why we want to get these kiosks going is because that is a revenue stream for the city and it's something that was already built into that project. And is a caveat to the FRB reimbursements.
And one of the things I'm gonna do by this year end is make sure that we put enough cash back into that fund, the parking fund. A deficit, to make sure that the revenues for the oval on the base are still in place. We have SAD funding for the downtown parking district and the oval district. Downtown's about 70,000, oval's about 14,000 every year. But by taking everything out of that fund, you kind of, it's gone with the money for the oval, and we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that cash is at least in place, so that the cash we've been spending is from the downtown SAD funding. And so we'll take a look at that. Because 14,000 over 10 years is going to be 140 grand that should stay out there roughly in its loose terms. And, you know, there's only 140,000 there now. Debt service will eat that up. So anyways, next one down to the water fund. That had a deficit started way back at the beginning of the year for about 700,000, when $1 million was transferred from the water operating cash to a capital project for the dams. That's going to be replaced.
For the dams,
Or-
is that what you said?
Dams.
Dams, okay.
and drilling the wells at the dams and, you know, dam improvements and so forth. That $1 million is going to be replaced by drinking water funding project that John has set up for $17 million. So we'll get that back. But the beauty of the impact demand charges, you see that that $700,000 was created by the transfer is now down to 225. So the impact demand charge revenue is beginning to rebuild that fund's revenue, which is helpful. So we'll be able to start establishing a capital reserve that once again, the water fund's been so dry, let's say, not to make a joke. The funding is dried up so much in there that we're not able to actually fund the capital project. it's down to like 60,000. Whereas like the capital projects reserve in the sewer funds 5 million, just by comparison. So anyway, that, we're gonna have to make sure is not negative at the end of the year, but depending on when that clean water funding, or excuse me, drinking water funding comes in, that'll replace all that and give that a surplus again. Sewer funding, you see, is very, very solid. It remains that way. Probably should transfer, oh, that's
Oh,
great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was doing perfect.
Yeah, that 1.9 million, you know, we should look at that before the end of the year and decide to make a transfer into capital reserve with some of those surplus funds. Because that's what it's for. When the surplus funding comes into these enterprise funds, they should go into the capital project reserve for future upgrades to the facilities. Library fund solvent, 350,000, pretty steady on that balance. They also have a $468,000 capital reserve. She talked about the Councilor Box, and they're going to be using that to pay for a new roof
Driveway roof.
and a driveway. That's right. So it's going to probably all 468 this year, so we'll have to go back out to New York State and see if there's any more grant funding that they can get hold.
And to highlight the work that they're doing at the library, especially with the roof, part of the conversation is that City Hall needs a roof. And we're looking at the potential of going to the same contractor to reduce everybody's costs. We have to figure out how we can do that and when we can do that. Library's looking at doing their project this year. We've got to capitalize our project starting next year. And so we just have to figure out if we can coordinate that together as a two kind of entities.
Last fund that's up there is the debt service fund. That $600,000 is DEC funding that was finally secured by John Ruff through a grant that went back before the reconstruction of the remediation of the landfill. What happened was we had to, after 30 years of the landfill being closed, grown over, totally naturally remediated, we had to dig it up and get put a barrier in it and then cap it over again to the tune of like $4 million. And we got some funding from the government for ERA funding, it was called at that time, as compared to the ARPA funding for now. But the ERA funding paid for about half, so we had to finance the other half through BFC serial bonds, that's environmental facility support. But in the process, John said also, you know, I want to apply for this DEC funding. And the way that works is, you know, you're 12th on the list, so they can fund 4 this year. So now you move up to 8th on the list. Now, okay, we'll do 3 next year, so now you move up to 5th on the list. So eventually, we moved up on the list and got $1.2 million from it. So that $1.2 million went into the debt service fund, now being used ratably over the next, I think we got the money 7 or 8 years to help pay down the debt on the CFC bonds that we filled through New York State to fund the balance of the $8 million costs. Now, all those together add up to the total cash that we have in what's called a general operating account. Go back to the other cash account, this thing.
Which one is that?
That's the one from the banks at the end of the month.
Which one is called?
Single page, yeah. That's it. And you can blow that up. That top account is the, there you go. Here's this 9 million. So that detail once a week describes what's in this general operating account. It's all the commingled funding from all the different funds, each separate track of the general ledger, but we keep it in one bank account. So you can go back to the other one now. Bounce back and forth. You get confused about it. It's all in hell. That's the part I like. That's the August report.
Oh, you're gonna do, what we were just talking
Yeah, the cash report is the one going back to the weekly cash. Yeah. Good. So then, the next part of this cash report we're charging $510,000 of what we call the restricted cash balances. Everybody was asking about that a couple of weeks ago, and there they are. The Clyde Lewis Airplane Reserve, the Aerial Fire Equipment Reserve, the Hotown Hero Restricted Fund Reserve, guarantees and bid bonds, police and community, restricted, foreign fire cash, and asset seizure. Those all are disclosed separately, and the new ones that have been moved over because of the GASB 84 change, you can see down here when they changed. We had to move those because of the accounting requirement. We got rid of all the trust and agency accounting we were doing with a lot of cash accounts, and we had to put them into the general fund. So we did that. So now they make up that $510,000 of the restricted cash, and of course, you see the total balance. The city accounts plus restricted to the 9.7 million. These accounts down here are MLBs. You hear about those in several meetings, of course. They're operating, they're consumer deposits, retirement reserve. This is the reserve for the Bitcoin processors and depreciation reserve.
I see a pretty significant drop between August 27 and September 3rd for the operating accounts for MLD.
Yeah, they pay the power bills once a month. And $1 million range every month.
And I just realized we have an MLD meeting at the end of this month, don't we?
See, it happens
We
like
do.
year to year. Right?
Oh, I
And
see.
of course, it
Okay.
happens year to year.
Thank you, Richard.
You build it up and then you pay it down. Gotta pay the light bill.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so back to the other cash report, just quickly.
I have some questions on this report though. So
Sure, go ahead.
poor Beth.
Sorry, Beth.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions I have. How much is our unencumbered fund balance total?
Well, it would be in the neighborhood of, the year was 4.8 million.
We added 2.1 million for 2020.
I sent you that in that worksheet where you get fund balance. Roll forward in the worksheet for the 5-year forecast. That's right in it.
Okay.
I think it was 4.8 million and then we added 2.1.
Mhm.
So we roughly what, 6, almost 7.
So do we currently have 6 million in unencumbered fund balance?
Yes. We do. Now,
So,
part of the issue with these reserves, like this asset seizure reserve is part of the total fund balance, but that's a reserve part.
right,
It's not available.
right. That's why,
So you're gonna see that there's, 9.7 in combination of all the funds for the cash. Hopefully the cash and the available fund balance are equal, but it doesn't all the time because there's receivables and so forth, and there's prepaid deposits.
Mhm.
Those things all affect a different account.
So-
Presentation of the balance sheet versus the cash.
so the rec complex keeps rolling negative. Do we know, do we have an anticipated amount of what the year-end negative amount for rec complex will be? Currently at negative 279, do we have an estimate of what that's going to be by the end of the year?
360, 370, because there's already a deficit of 80,000 in there.
Okay, and so that will be covered by,
We'll have to transfer.
Fund balance, right. And then we have the outstanding back pay for the police department union whenever we settle that.
Yep.
That's coming to at some point.
Yep.
And,
Depends on, how many years that we do.
right,
Maybe 2 years to start with.
And it also depends on when we settle that contract.
right,
And when we agree to pay it, and there's a lot of caveats to that, which are mostly unanswered right now.
mhm.
Okay.
Richard, what do you think is an appropriate amount of unencumbered fund balance for us to maintain in the general fund?
Well, I think, the council went through that when they had a meeting pound of people from the state, and the state always used to say that, it's 5 to 10% you should keep on hand. But the council at that time agreed that they thought 20 was more appropriate. Newton was saying, I think 30% should be more appropriate. So 30% of 23 million, which is what our operating normally every year. 30% of 23 million, about 6 to 7 million. Right?
Okay.
So we're kind of in that neighborhood. But I don't think, I don't know, I have to look at the numbers again, because I'm trying to remember from everything from, this says it's, those are general. It says recreation was actually 288 negative. So that's going to make that worse. 288 plus what, 278, maybe 500, 600 range. Special grants for it. You can look at the government. City government. Yeah, unassigned was 4.467 million at the end of 2020. So that includes the 2 million we had. So we're only at 4.5 million.
Now, the,
Total fund balance is 5.7 million. So the other pieces are the reserves and prepaid balances and so forth.
now is the, and I'm sure you've answered this before, but the money that we're getting from the federal government for the stimulus, is that separate from the unencumbered fund balance amount?
First of all, we're getting CHIPS money,
Mhm.
and we're getting the touring program money, which Mayor was talking about for implementation of capital improvements on the streets. Touring program for Margaret Street, hopefully next year. That's all capital project funding. Of course, you have to spend it in order to get it. So it's not cash in the bank. And we just got ARPA funding of $1 million, and we have set that aside to be in the reserve. We're going to get another $1 million up next year, which is in the budget because we know we're going to get it, and that's going to be budgeted to a reserve. So it doesn't affect the general fund property tax.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. That's the question I'm asking. Okay.
Because it wouldn't make sense, like we were talking about today, to include that funding in the general fund.
No, you
lower
can't.
taxes,
Right,
Drop it down, then you don't get that $1 million next year.
That's
You gotta
right.
Drop it right, or pop it right back up again.
right. That's why I was
And
asking.
we doing what the state used to do, we had cardiac budget plans that.
Right.
Deficit surplus, deficit surplus. I mean, New York State was like that all through the 90s, it was crazy. So that funding is going to be set aside for other reserve issues. That's $2 million, that's not money. It's in the cash right now.
I do want to
Sure,
point
yeah,
out,
yeah.
yeah, it's there, but I also want to point out that we're still in the process of very clearly understanding the guidelines for how that money can be spent, right? So I know a lot of people said, oh, can we spend it on this, can we spend it? You know, I know some of the things that we can spend it on in terms of infrastructure, but at the end of the day, one of the things that we've gone back to our auditors on is to do an analysis of the spending guidelines, and then we can take those spending guidelines and say, these apply to us, this is where we can and cannot spend that money. NICOM has done and is doing the same thing. One of the things that I'm gonna come away with at the end of this month is a better understanding of where that money can be spent. I certainly don't foresee, well, I don't know, unless we have a very clear understanding, that money probably gonna hang out until next year, until we can actually identify some more projects that we can start to use those funds for. But until then, it's hard to say, hey, we're gonna spend $500,000 on a new road or something like that.
We've got over some wood looking at, best practice use of those
Yeah,
funds.
yes.
That's recommended by the Fed.
And that, by the way, then looking at that is funded by the fund itself. So we can use ARPA money to hire the consultant to do that analysis to provide us that answer. So that's not money that we have to spend out of our pocket.
Any other questions on the weekly cash report? So then back on the bank balance report. Just briefly. No. There it is. It's good. So this shows all the accounts that we have. That's it right there.
Sorry.
So the combined cash on the top two are in the general fund, the general operating account, which includes all the operational cash for all of the funds through that service. Not in order. EFT just means that's where we get electronic funds transferred, and we move that into the operating account. The capital fund is segregated money for capital spending only. The payroll is a pass-through on some payroll accounts, trust and agency. That's all we have left in there that's allowed to be considered custodial funds. That balance used to be like 2.6 million if you look back on it several years ago. Because we had the compost insurance reserve out there, as well as all the collectibles things and home cafeterias and police community center, all that stuff has been moved. Cafeteria plan is, mostly withholdings from individuals to pay for healthcare, and also the city's contribution to the cafeteria. And here's the reserves. Like I said, water reserves way down. Sewer's up. I said 5 million, 6.7. Library 455. And here's the asset seizure, the aerial fire equipment, and the Clyde trust. Those are actual reserves established. So they have a separate bank account. Those other restricted cash amounts are still in the general fund, but we keep restricted by accounting for them on the books as separate funds that can't be used for anything else but their restricted purpose. Here's the compost escrow insurance fund. That's the burned out plant. That's in the sewer fund now. And the rest of these things are the CD accounts. That's the $2 million that Matt was talking about. Getting going again for local development. And here's the actual cash accounts for it. Closed down the city clerk account, didn't need it anymore, and closed down canal corridor and diversification. Just don't need that many bank accounts. We try to close as many as we can to see, to keep them at a respectable level, manageable level. We do this report once a month based on what's in the bank. Any questions on those? The financial report, I guess, would be nice. Bar graphs on the front. There it is. All right, so this is the August.
Sorry, I have to share.
Sorry. The August report, just put it together yesterday. The bar graph is, nice to look at, but when you compare this year versus last year, if you just page down one, very different look. Of course, it's based on the activity, but it's also based on the budget. The budgets are different, the bar graph's gonna be different. So what I like to look at is the numbers. So I'm a numbers guy. Slash. Okay, so here's the actual numbers: expenditures, revenues, net results today. And compared to I know it flips really quick compared to the budget. Pretty well, the general fund, obviously. This recognizes the collection of all the property taxes, which hasn't happened yet. I think we're still looking at collecting 700,000. Any receivables that are out there are considered revenue at this point. So, but we are doing really well in the net results. Of course, $1 million of that is this new revenue we got in from the ARPA fund. We also got a lot of funding this year from last year's AIM funding. 597,000 this year that was held back last year. The state turned around and said, okay, we're going to give you that. So it's showing up this year. In addition to probably a full AIM funding that we're going to get for 6-8 million
For 2022,
for 2021.
for 2021, and then ink funding is also restored for 2022 as well. This number also includes a significant increase over budget of sales tax, something that we did not expect to see come in the second quarter. I believe. We should also see an increase in for the rest of the year as well.
So when does AIM funding come in typically?
September and December, we get like 10% of it in September, and then we get the lion's share of it in December, first week, just in time for us to pay the retirement, because it eats that all up. Retirement's been increased so much that it eats our income, but the timing of the cash is perfect.
Mhm.
And I think the state knows that. It's like, we'll send you the AIM just before you need to pay the retirement bill in December. We always pay it early to take advantage of the discount on the price of the retirement bill. Other people pay better. So we get a bit of a discount, like 1.5% off, but it's worth it, you know, it's cash that accumulates.
Mhm.
So the rec complex showing a surplus, but that's just because we're funding it with general fund contributions. Parking lot, doing okay so far, but it's gonna get hurt pretty quickly when we pay the debt service. Water fund, you can see that the negative cash over on the other side of 225 doesn't compare to the negative 435 deficit that's being run, and that's because there's that big $1 million transfer. But the difference is the receivables. Sewer fund's doing okay, 679 versus library. Now, last year, if we just roll down to look at the numbers from last year. This next one. General fund, you see is pretty much consistent. Our complex was a loser. Parking lot wasn't doing that well, but then again, it's a lower budget. Water was doing well, sewer was doing really well, library was doing well. So it's all a matter of what the actual numbers are. When you look at this graph, it doesn't give you the same impact of the general fund being $3 million ahead, just because it's a different budget. Then the next pages roll you into the actual detail. And this is where we see our state aid. State aid. Right there, yeah. This one's off the charts, it's like 995,000.
That's federal.
That federal, oh,
State.
yeah, that's the federal, right? The state is up higher, right? State aid's up well though too, because of all the receipts that we've had for, you know, the payback of the aid and so forth. So this is where you look at each one of the summarized areas of the revenue accounts, which are negatives at the top. And then you get into the expenses, common council, units, support, so forth. These are all the departmental, police, fire. So I mean, that's a good summarized look. It's rolled up into those graphs. And if you roll to the next page, here's where the graphs numbers come from. You're good at actual, don't use the encumbrances. It shows you what's happening in the month. So if you want to look at just the month, here's the budget. Here's the revised budget. This has all the budget transfers that we've made for the year, which is the next one of the next slides we're going to look at. But you can see the revenues versus the expenses. At this point in time, include all the property taxes, top of the previous page. It's 11,364,000. Or 11,568,000. That includes the deferred tax too. It shows what we've recognized for the revenue today, 11,608. Not all collected yet, but anyway, it's part of the total revenue. So as you go down to the following page, you see all the other funds, rent complexes. One paragraph, I think. Well, I'm sorry, you were right. This is the beginning of it. That's where we get the surplus from there. Here's the budgeted deficit. And parking lot. So far, a surplus from there with this budgeted deficit. The debt services we're going to hit later, and that's what's going to create the deficits for the year. Water fund is next. This is what's hurting those numbers. It's that $1 million I told you about the transfer to that dam capital project for the wells and the dam improvements. That's coming right out of the operating. Not to be confused with transfers out of the reserves, which when you down to the sewer fund. The million from here was transferred out of the reserve, so it doesn't affect the operations. A little bit different. You have, a capital reserve. Transferring for that, from that to the capital projects, it doesn't hurt the operating results because it's coming out of the reserve. If you take it out of your operating cash, it's a current recognized expense.
So basically, are you saying it's like a budget neutral kind of transaction? Is that what you're saying?
It is.
Okay.
And actually, you get some of it back because John's clean water fund project, not to be confused with the drinking water project. Clean water is 19 million, drinking water 17 million. We got $5.6 million in so far on the clean water. And that replaces 800,000 of what was transferred through the funding for the project. We'll get the balance of it and they'll close that out. Transfer out. So, library's the next one. And this is last year, sorry, 2020. Do you go back up one page? Yeah, here's the library. Whoop. It's very touchy, isn't it? Here's your grand total, which is slightly adjusted for some things that, have to be included or excluded. The library's office 46 million. They budgeted the 65 or 46,000. They budgeted 65,000 surplus, but on the revised budget, they balanced their books on that because they put it back in their spending for books. This 65,000. That was part of the austerity budgeting for them. Reduce funding, spend, other budgets been revised. So the next section is the 2020 comparisons, and it says the same stuff. If you page all the way through this to the expenses, this is where you can really take a look at what the city's spending on account by account, type of expense. I know this is very, very busy. Over here, you've got 2018, and you have 19 and 20 and 21, and this is the payroll spending. So you can look at every summarized payroll spending for every department, what's budgeted, what's been spent, how it compares to last year. And at the bottom of this, you can see where we are on an annualized basis against the budget. Right here. Total annualized spending versus budget, we're 93%. That's if you take what we spend now and say, okay, annualize it to the rest of the year, compared to the budget, we're gonna be at 92%. And this is the general fund, you're gonna be at 92%. We're obviously not there yet because the actual spending is only 7 million. So this is where, when you were asking about, how do I see how payrolls are going? Everyone.
Yeah, but we don't have that report, so
You do.
We do.
You get that report every single month. You get this report every single month.
no, I mean, right now, do we have? We didn't,
Oh,
yeah.
I sent it to you.
No, not.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, not today, but this is the report that gets sent out with this committee. The front page of this report are those graphs.
So yeah, we can make sure you get that tonight.
Mhm. Thank you.
And then the next section on this is the overtime. That's usually great. This is the overtime. Once again, you can go down to the bottom and see how all the overtime accounts are looking against the budget. For the whole city. We're at 17%, and for the general fund, 145% annualized, based on where we are right now. Obviously, the overtime account is killing the general fund, pretty much killing this whole analysis since the fire department. You can roll back up and see what that is. Now, fire is right there, 293. Police. 122. Police are pretty much on plan, but the fire is way.
Mhm.
Yeah, you look at what percentage of the year we're through at this point, which is about, what, 61%?
66 and 2/3.
Yep, and so you look at, we're 66 and 2/3% of the year, and then you look at this percent used, and you say, well, if you split it out equally over the months, and how much would they use over that time? So even though, so like police is, they're, you look at it, they're ahead of spending.
Fire wasn't even as bad last year, this month was 239 versus 293 this year. They had a lot of retirements though, so they boosted the hours for the guys to retire. So that's the overtime. The next section is the equipment. Equipment spending is pretty small, by comparison to the rest of the city's numbers, the city budget numbers. It's pretty sparse. It just depends on who's buying equipment and for what. See one in there for central data processing. That was our new server. Oh, excuse me, your email machine. We did this year. The server should have been last year. No, I got that wrong. Four. It's a big report, so it's tough to get this all on. But long story short, it's however much equipment is being purchased in each department and each line item. And, these are things that are pretty much capitalized, but are coming out of the operating funds, not part of capital expenditure planning funds. So there's a slight difference. These are the things we decided we can afford out of our operating funds. Police department usually have a car routines every year. Budgeting for next year, we're looking at having some vehicles in this. You've seen some of the council have seen them already. Bottom line on this. Oh. It's not a lot of spending. 75,000, that's encumbered, that's the. So the next section is contracted services, and this is a lot of detail. This is about all the 4,000 accounts for spending on everything that you can imagine that this expense money on. And it's all the accounts for all the different departments summarized for contracted services. It's a lot of spending. But not as much as the payrolls, obviously. Tells you which accounts are tracking well, which aren't, and which are budgeted, which weren't, that kind of thing. And some of the budgets we've had to adjust. The budgets we're looking at here are the revised budgets to show how we're actually doing against what we put out there for appropriated funds. The previous report had the original budget and the revised budget set to see both. The ones that were first up. But you don't have to go through that. Okay. Going down to the bottom, this is a 2-pager.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yes. Once again, jumping back and forth and really keep the audience. Okay. So on the annualized spending, we're not in bad shape on this at all. Only 69%, just about 2/3 of the year. And there's a projection just for the general fund for the end of the year. So the spending, out-of-pocket spending is looking good. Tracking really well. Payroll is on plan. The only one that's really bad is the overtime. The next section is benefits. So anything you want to know about the city's numbers is in this report. It gives it all, plus a lot of this by comparison. You can see, 2021, year to date, 2019. Health insurance, big number in here. Pretty much right on plan, on 66.8%. It's tracking pretty well. Got some big unemployment credits in here because the state decided to give us back all 3 quarters, first, second, and third quarter of last year, there was a check for like $173,000 and said, here's all your unemployment back for last year. You can see those credits in there. They didn't charge us for the fourth quarter. And
Or
we can't
the
figure
first and
out-
second quarter of this
You
year.
can't figure out why they have nothing for us in the first and second quarters this year. I'm thinking that there's a balloon out there that's gonna pop. They're all of a sudden gonna say, oh Christ, we should be collecting this unemployment. I think the state's very confused about what they're doing with unemployment. We were told originally the federal unemployment for $600 would be covered by the Fed, and half of the normal unemployment will be covered by the state, and the city would have to pay the other half during the pandemic last year. Now they come back and said, we're gonna give you back everything you paid on unemployment, because we're a direct pay. We pay it right out of pocket, we don't pay a reserve, into a reserve, and take the cash out of that. We're a direct pay, so they give us back everything we paid for the first three quarters, didn't charge us for the fourth quarter, and we don't know what's going on this year, because we received nothing from them for the first and second quarters. We're bugging them, because I don't want this to be a surprise later when we owe unemployment that we're not budgeted for. So we're looking into that. So that's these credits.
Richard, what kind of number, do you have any idea what kind of number that would be? Like given,
Our unemployment expenses are pretty low.
Right.
actually. There's gonna be some carryover from last year for people still on unemployment, because it's been extended for a year, and there's been additional separate funding from the Fed. Certainly not gonna be $173,000 like what we got back for the first, second, and third quarters of last year. But we've got to find out what the number is and anticipate them charging us for it.
yeah,
Because somebody in the state has got something mixed up, and they, to stop charging us for unemployment doesn't make any sense at all. Unless they think they've got so much money coming in from the Fed, they don't have to worry about it. Maybe one department thinks that way, and the other one, when we say, hey, you haven't billed us, they say, well, your numbers are out on the website if you want to go look at it. It's like, are you gonna bill us? No, not right now. So it's a dumb answer, I know. So we'll look into that.
okay.
But that's what these negatives are in here for. 72,000 there, 46,000 there, 7,500 there. We've allocated based on where it was actually paid last year. And NLD gets specific too, which aren't part of these reports. NLD is reporting them separate. So if you roll all the way down to the bottom of this, you can see where our benefits are tracking on a year-to-date basis. And annualized. 79 for the city, 79 for the, versus budget for the general fund. I think, do I have the healthcare out there too? No,
No, just the employee benefits.
total. benefits,
Yeah.
Yeah, here's our total spending versus budget. Not bad, 54. Last year was about either 46, but then again, we had curtailed operations last year. Healthcare went way down last year because nobody was going to the hospital, no elective procedures, no ambulance, no nothing. But as predicted, we would run pretty much the same plan for this year, and the actuaries have said, keep your budget neutral for next year on healthcare, keep it the same. Any specific questions about any of this? I know it's a lot to absorb.
Excellent explanation.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the
Thank you
information.
so much.
Okay. But any questions, but please send them to me and we'll get you an answer. Yeah, I've got the reports, we'll get them all to you. The last one was the unappropriated list of budget transfers. I only added one to it since the last time we did this report. That was the one we just did for the mayor's office for $2,000 to provide for non-common meeting expenses. That isn't the right one. That's too low. We're at 800,000 plus or minus at this point.
I don't think so. I think that's, when we checked the last
July
month,
6th, it says up here.
Yeah.
Is that the right one or no?
July 6th.
We did one for August 5th, and now we've done one for September the 8th. So
Which one was the,
September the 8th.
which one was the August one?
There it is.
Yeah.
This is 90.
Yes, go down to the bottom. So it's 588. Yeah, it's got the latest one in there.
Yep.
667.
What is that a total of exactly?
That's the total of all the budget adjustments we've made for
Okay,
the year. That came out of available unappropriated fund balance.
Got it.
It doesn't include others where we transfer from one expense to the other. This is the one that's had an impact on all of the equity sections of everybody's balance sheet across. Mostly it's the general fund, only one from the water. Rec complex is in here, but the general fund is feeding the rec complex surplus.
And part of what I like to present in this is some of the emergency expenditures that we've had to make versus some of the optional expenditures that we've made. For example, when the pump at the police station failed, it wasn't budgeted. We had to find the money from somewhere. The $2,000 that sending me to a conference was appropriated from my 1100 line because we had a late hiring in the year. There was some funds there. The $91,000 for police, as we discussed last time, it was an open PO in 2020, which ended up getting closed. That money rolled over to 21. We spent it on the same thing that we had planned on spending it on this year. $109,000 on line 23 was a reimbursable that we spent money on. That was unbudgeted. We spent money on, but it was reimbursed as part of the grant. And so
Yeah, this one was a surprise. Of course, we didn't know that was coming. We knew there was a claim out there, but we didn't know it was going to be settled and had to be settled. The city's covering the deductible. But yeah, you're right about this one. This actually took it out of the unappropriated fund balance, but it was put back in there in 2020.
Yeah.
So it comes out in 21 to cover those purchases. So that's a net zero impact on the total balance.
So I'd like to show, like, even though we've looked at this and say, like, you look at the general fund and say, oh, we spent $580,000 that we didn't budget for. Oh, what are we doing? You know, why are we spending so much money? Again, some of these are emergency IT costs. It's on there, right? Something we didn't plan for, but we need to spend on. Some of it's reimbursed, some of it's net zero spending from last year. So just like to categorize it and quantify it a little bit more. I think the last time I did that, I think we were right around, I'll round up about 300,000 or so in spending that we didn't plan for, that we spent because we said, hey, this is an important thing to do. And on the flip side of that, we've had a significant amount of revenue that's come to the city that was unexpected. Sales tax, for example, came in significantly higher than expected, about 60% of the year higher, came in about halfway through the year. So
Some of this is reflective of an austerity budget from 2020 plan.
and
We were bare bones.
yeah, and I try to explain that not to justify the spending, but to assuage concerns about why are we spending so much money?
Yeah.
You know, certainly as cautious as anybody in terms of being responsible with the city's finances, and certainly don't come off like spending money hand over fist. So it's just the one to quantify where and how and why we're spending those funds.
Any questions?
Thank you, Richard, that was very thorough and very helpful. Thank you.
Richard, do you have an update for the ClearGov implementation? Sorry, Richard, do you have an update of the ClearGov?
Yes, the accounts that I sent them for revenues, expenses, and balance sheets have all been loaded. Looked through them with their technical expert. They've sent me a document that we have to take a look at to see if we want to summarize accounts any differently, if we have everything in. So they're about to deploy what I've given them, as well as the numbers that are in there for the history, to say that we're ready to start looking at the product and using it. So we're just about finished with the data upload, they call it. So I'll send you that. I just got it this morning, actually.
And I've got my log into that system as well. I've been poking through. There's some tutorials to go through, which I've been going through to get myself familiar with it. The ideal situation was that we would have had an implementation that we could load the budget numbers into. And, we'll still keep pressing on that and, but by all means, we'll look at next year, coming years to do budgeting through that tool alone. And that's something that will be done in real time. People can take a look at all of the budget as it's being developed. It'll be a nice tool that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna send that to you tomorrow, so we can take a look at that, and then I can get everybody signed up, have a user ID to get in there to take a look at them.
Okay, thank you.
Once we say we got a final product that we're gonna start building more information for. Same way as we were doing it, building the specific reports in that aren't specific to our financial system. Like records of arrest, records of fire, those kind of things, which we can do, and start to build those in, as well as develop the budget, so. That'll be available pretty sure. Okay.
I'll move the budget process update up and then we'll talk about the appointment to the Board of Assessment Review. At this point, we've met with all of the department heads, the counselors assigned to those department heads for budget meetings. You guys can provide the feedback in terms of how you feel it's going. Looking at it from my perspective, I felt that it's going pretty well. It certainly spreads out some of the responsibility to different counselors to be exposed to different departments and how things function. Jim Talon got maybe even got the short end of this short straw on this one. She was assigned to water and sewer, and even I kind of look at that and my eyes get a little twirly when I look at the water and sewer budget, because it is dense. As Councilor Bob commented early on, we met Jeff I and Richard met with from Public Works, Councilor Canales, the PD. I'm going to stop there because it's just going to go out the door. I don't remember who was assigned, but everybody was assigned to a department. And at this point, I will review some of the updates and changes that were discussed at those meetings. And if needed, most likely call all those people back into a room again in case there's anything drastic that we need to talk about or move around. But when I do make changes, I'll send those out to the appropriate counselors and department heads. At this point, I'm looking at the last week of September. The Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We don't have any committee meetings, no regular meetings that week. So it's a good time for us to kind of all get in a room and discuss the entire budget as a council and as a city. So department heads will be there. And we'll do the same thing that we did in the other room. Department by department, line by line, with the department head and the entire council. To discuss the budget, and if any major changes are made, I'll take that week and a half to make those changes. The budget is then delivered to the council with the mayor's budget message. I am looking at delivering a packet for everybody to review, which will be a summary of historical city data along with the proposed budget. That will be on October 7th. And it will also include significant detailed accounting as plugged into our accounting system so that we can have account by account review for the 2022 proposed budget.
So September 30th, we do have an MLD meeting though, right? September 30th?
It's on the schedule, but it doesn't seem right because we had a meeting in July, so.
You will have a MLD meeting on September 30th at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
The budget meetings will be the 27th. This is what I'm looking at right now. It's tentative because I haven't really sent out the official calendar invites. I'm looking at having them start at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The 27th, 28th, and 29th. Now, are we gonna need all 9 hours? I don't know, maybe, right? I want to just make sure that we have enough time to review those, and we'll probably focus primarily first on the general fund. And then we'll go through funds 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 throughout the rest of the week, as enterprise funds are generally managed alone, but with some local share transferred to balance those books. So that, one thing is just make sure that people are aware that's the kind of process here. And yeah, that's it.
So I'm not going to be available that Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Yeah, and for full transparency, I cannot stay until 8 o'clock Monday and Wednesday. I can stay till 7.
Yeah.
No, I can't stay.
So we'll
till-
make, are you available, are you available at 4
Mhm.
on those days?
Yeah.
Anybody available? I know Jim Town's a little stretched for time on those days, but is there something that we can work out with your employment to have you be there at 4 o'clock?
I can make that work.
Those 3 days, that'd be awesome. So we'll plan on 4 to 7 on those 3 days. And I'll have Beth confirm with everybody and confirm with the department heads and just for everybody, keep in mind that this is public. This will be public. This will hold it here. And the department heads will be here. We will invite the public and everybody else to join us for these discussions. It's not going to be an open dialogue with the public, but it's certainly something for people to be available and watch the process. And we make all the formal meeting and all that fun stuff, and maybe even get public comment at the beginning if needed, kind of things. All right. 4.1 draft resolution appointing Derek Rosenbaum to the Board of Assessment Review. I'll take a motion on that. Motion, Councilor Canales, second Councilor Gibbs. Discussion on this is that there's a vacancy in the Board of Assessment Review. And most of us, well, you might not know, Derek, Mr. Rosenbaum used to be the city assessor. And
I
kind
didn't
of
know
felt
that.
like it was a good fit for him to move in this position, just to be aware, and this is all public knowledge as well. Mr. Rosenbaum is stepping down from the planning board. I think his last planning board meeting was October. We are looking, as in the planning board, is looking for his replacement. And I think they need 2 vacancies at this point, where they can deal with 2 vacancies. So spread the word, Jeff. We'll get that vacancy plus 1 more vacancy filled on the planning board side of this. But this is a vacancy here, and I felt like he was a very good fit for this position. He's been of service to the city of Plattsburgh for several years, and this is a nice slide into his position. He's stepping down from the planning board. By the way, he's stepping down from the planning board because his time is encumbered as a Plattsburgh City School Board member. That's why he's stepping down. All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Carried. No public comment, no executive session. I will now take a motion to adjourn this meeting. Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?